Dr. Tom Gruber from the National Community Rights Network, and I'm here with my guest, Michelle Sanborn, who's the state organizer for the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. Her state is New Hampshire, and she is also part of the New Hampshire Community Rights Network, and they've been doing some very good historic work there for basically declaring rights of people, communities, and nature, and banning harmful corporate projects which are trying to invade communities there in New Hampshire. Through passing local laws, they've been able to ban these things. And there's some great risks in place right now. There are some political maneuverings and things like that to take away all vestiges of what is oftentimes called local control, which is basically the right to local community self-government. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Great. I would like for you then to talk a little bit about the history of the town meetings in New Hampshire, because that's really what's happening here, is that the authority of the town meeting is basically being eroded, all to the extent of just being able to determine who gets to pick up the trash and who and when roads are repaired and stuff like that in local communities. And other than that, everything else is being considered a state issue. How is that going for you?
Yeah. So if we look back in, let's go beyond recent history. So recent history, definitely communities are very restricted as to what kind of laws they can and cannot pass at the local level using the town meeting process.
Right.
But if we go back beyond recent history and look at just from the colonial times, this is something local control, local governing authority existed essentially from kind of that day one. Communities were making decisions about everything within their community, and they were doing that very democratically through the local town meeting governing process. Over the years, that has served communities very well. And we've also seen attacks against that over the years as well. So just the American Revolution was an attack on the right to local self-government and how that was affecting communities. And so we had a huge bloody war regarding that kind of oppression and that kind of restriction on people's rights. And so how has that changed things in New Hampshire? There's still town meeting process, but it certainly doesn't hold the same kind of authority that it used to hold. It doesn't have the same kind of power that it used to have. And even the structure of the town meeting itself has changed. So it used to be you just had town meeting and everybody showed up. And if you didn't show up, you really didn't have a voice. You didn't have a voting power. Now we have a variety of different processes, such as we call them SB2 towns, and that's regarding Senate Bill 2 that occurred a number of years ago. And what that did was it divided the town meeting process. So you have the kind of personal showing up, decision-making process that we still call town meeting, and then you have a ballot process, which happens on a different day, and you show up and you cast your ballot to vote for your elected officials, your school meeting or your school officials, and other decisions for the town, the budget, et cetera, as well as state election officials and any federal elections as well, are all done through the ballot process. So that division has definitely affected local governing authority. The local community through the town meeting process cannot make decisions about all the kinds of things that they used to be able to make decisions about.
Yeah. So the town meetings were the venue for communities to vote on the enactment of the Community Bill of Rights. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that works and why these are so important?
Yeah, so in New Hampshire, through the town meeting process, any resident of the community can do what is called a petitioned warrant article. We call the town warrant is really just the agenda for town meeting. And so through a petitioning process, that community bill of rights can then be placed on the town meeting warrant, and depending on the town meeting structure of the community determines whether or not that that town is traditional town meeting, where everyone comes together and you have that discussion and you have the vote at the same time regarding the things that are on the warrant. Then that can pass that day. And then you have people from the community, those that petitioned it should be the ones that would stand up and speak regarding the community bill of rights, why it's being petitioned. Others can also stand up and speak as to why they feel that it shouldn't pass. So it's an open dialogue. It's happening face to face within the community, and you actually have that vote cast at that same time after the discussion. Then we have the SB2 towns have what are called deliberative sessions, so that divides it. The discussion occurs, but no voting occurs, which is interesting. So you can debate, you can discuss, but nobody actually votes on it that day. That then gets moved to the ballot election day. And this has received some interesting attacks this year. So we had an unprecedented event happen in the spring. We actually had a blizzard on election day. And in New Hampshire law, in our Constitution, we have it spelled out very clearly that the moderator has authority to govern the election process. And our town moderators, in connection with information that they received from the New Hampshire Municipal Association attorneys, as well as information from the Secretary of State, the governor was saying, stay off the roads, stay safe. This also included information from select boards, which are the kind of ultimate authority governing body in a community. And they were also getting feedback from the road crews, and decided over 70 towns decided that they would postpone elections for the safety of the people coming out to vote. So that was posted at least 24 hours in advance. All of the elections were postponed to within a week of the original election day. And so everything was done and wrapped up within a week. The state then came back and really expressed offense by this kind of local governing decision that was made by the moderators to postpone the elections. And that created a lot of conflict between the local communities and the state as to who really has that kind of authority. And the end result was a debate over reinterpreting law. And so the state is now reinterpreting law to say that the moderators really didn't have authority to make the decision regarding the election day, which they are defining as referring specifically to the ballot votes, whereas the moderators are saying we've always had this authority, and there is no distinction between election day and town meeting day. So now there is a study commission that has been approved by the governor to essentially reinterpret state law to decide who really has this authority. And of course, it's the state that's making that decision. And in that study committee, what I think is interesting for people to note, because it's often in the fine print, right? You got to read the fine print. And the fine print essentially says that there will be House leadership, Senate leadership, participating in that committee, but no moderators, nobody representing the towns. So these decisions are going to be made by elected officials at the state level regarding what we have the authority to do at the local level. It's unprecedented. Town meeting goes back to the creation of the colonies. It existed long before we had statutory laws, on the books. It existed before we had even the New Hampshire Constitution, the federal Constitution, any of these what we consider to be real solid, governing documents. That tends to be the general perception of those documents. And it still exists today. It's just being whittled away to the point that our democracy is significantly being threatened at the local level in New Hampshire, all of New England really, but New Hampshire, we're seeing this significantly this year. It's the first time in over a decade that we have a Republican-dominated government here at the state level. So our House is controlled by Republicans, the Senate is controlled by Republicans, and our governor is Republican. And that really takes a lot of balance out of the equation when you look at what is being proposed, what is being passed, and how that's affecting local communities.
Yes, so what you're describing seems to me a lot to do with the fact that centralization is the move in politics now. And so what we're seeing is that it's occurring on the international level with these trade agreements, which are, superior to national law. So if a nation decides they don't want to advertise smoking sufficiently to satisfy the tobacco industry, the tobacco industry can sue the nation for the losses and be compensated, for not selling as much tobacco products as they would have expected if they'd done the advertising in the first place. So that's a really interesting trend that we see internationally, and we've seen it happening in the states around the country, with states passing preemptive legislatively passed laws to give them supreme authority over whatever goes on in your community. So like here in Colorado, where I am, we have an Oil and Gas Act, which is being used by the courts to preempt our local laws to protect ourselves from people, communities, and nature from the fracking wells coming into our communities. But it turns out that, the right to local community self-government is constitutional law here, and that the initiative process is constitutional law. And so when we enact these laws through initiative, the judges are ruling actually that the statutory law is superior to constitutional law, which is really interesting. So there's a move nationwide now to take away all local authority to make decisions about what happens in our own communities, because those are everything pretty much is being interpreted as a state matter.
Absolutely.
So would you say that that's the trend that you're seeing there happening in New Hampshire with the town meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there was the New Hampshire Community Rights Network supported a bill this year labeled as SB 109, so Senate Bill 109. And the gist of that bill was to reaffirm and really kind of root into statutory law the moderator's authority. It was on a different subject matter, not so much being able to decide whether or not an election could be postponed due to a weather emergency, but more along the lines of, in New Hampshire, we're talking, we have the first in the nation primary here, so this is a big deal. It brings in a lot of money to the state. So this isn't just about our right to cast a vote. This is about big money. And so the state is very interested in protecting that big money that comes in. And so what we were supporting was a verification of the vote count. And the moderator has this authority. They are charged by statutory law to provide an accurate vote count, to verify that vote count. And yet almost 90% of New Hampshire communities use the AccuVote machine to count. It is an optical machine, that is true. We have a paper ballot trail, but our court system says that that paper ballot trail is not public property, meaning you don't have access to it to verify the vote. So if our moderator doesn't have access to it, who does? Nobody other than at the state level. And so they were interpreting this by saying, well, that's a recount. So we do have access to those paper ballots. We can just do a recount. Well, a recount is not the same thing as a verification vote count. So some people call them audits. A post-election audit is a bit different. That happens after everything is completely tallied and everything is verified. But this would be a pre verification count. So it would happen before the tally is actually reported. And it's very quick and it's very random. It doesn't mean recounting everything. And there was a lot of opposition to this, which really surprised us, because really what it was doing was bringing into harmony the revised statutes and the New Hampshire Constitution. So really making it clear, bringing it into harmony, and securing the moderator's authority. And again, significant opposition. Well, why do they not want to have that vote count verified? And now we're seeing through this process that what's happening is it was a preemptive issue that came out finally very clearly. We knew that. But to get the people to hear that coming from the state election officials, I think was a bit of an eye-opener for some people. For them to say that, look, the only reason why we don't support this measure is simply because there is no statutory law that gives the moderator this kind of specific authority. And so the obvious, logical, common sense response is, why do you think we're proposing this? To give them that authority, to have that harmony, to bring it into clarification. So then, the next thing that people need to ask themselves is, why is the Secretary of State opposed to this? Why was the Attorney General's office opposed to this? I would say that the majority of Senate and House representatives supported it until the Secretary of State and Attorney General's office came out in opposition to it, and then they flipped. So there's a lot of political shenanigans going on, and there are agendas to be fulfilled, and it would be clear in my mind that it's more important to the state to fulfill those political agendas than it is to actually secure and protect voting rights of people in New Hampshire.
Yes, so then this is really, brings us to the point where the work that you've been doing there in response to this, but also as a proactive measure to expand the rights that communities enjoy, is the work that you're doing on this free and fair elections community bill of rights. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this has been a big point of discussion with a number of communities here. At this point, we have not had a community decide to place that on their 2018, so the upcoming town meeting, which would be in the spring of 2018. It's interesting how there's still this kind of sentiment of, well, maybe we could just propose a new legislative bill, next session that will remedy this. And so it's been an ongoing discussion. And really the gist of this is that, it's not enough just to have the right to vote when corporations can influence that. And we have, we're being told essentially what we can vote on. We're also, really being determined or outside of our control whether or not we can vote. And at the end of the day, does that vote really matter? And so this is the conversation that the communities are having. And I think it's a bit of an eye-opener for New Hampshire communities that have really put their confidence and trust in the facade of local governing authority through the town meeting process. And I call that a facade because it's very limited by what the state says that we really have the authority to do. But until people see that clearly, there's still that sentiment that somehow the state is going to be their savior, or that the legislative process, their elected officials are going to be their savior. And this was the first time that I have witnessed such an unveiling. And at the community level of people seeing this very personal, I mean, getting right into their town moderator and their town meeting process, where the state is dipping its hand into that process. And they're starting to see this restrictive pressure that is now coming down. And it's, I think that there's still a lot of concern and apprehension amongst communities about, well, can we really stand up to this structure? And so this is where the free and fair elections ordinance comes into play, to be able to present to communities that you still have this authority to bring something forward at the local level. You need to be utilizing that to the fullest extent while we still have it. And confronting the structure of the system that is saying that you don't have this democratic decision-making authority at the local level. So use it while we can to the most significant process, and getting at the root of things, which is our voting, our fundamental right to vote. And so if we can't have an accurate vote count, if we can't decide what we vote on, if we can't decide whether or not we can vote, there's push for limiting people's voting access. So we just had a bill pass, Senate Bill 3, which is really a voter preventive bill, making it more difficult for people to vote. Now in New Hampshire, the governor signed into law that you must prove your domicile here, and not just prove your domicile, but prove your intent to domicile here. And that's going to make it very difficult for people that might be in between jobs, aren't sure whether or not they're going to make New Hampshire their permanent home, yet they don't have a permanent residency someplace else. So they're completely disenfranchised from voting altogether if they can't prove to the state of New Hampshire their intent to domicile here. And if they don't prove it, it comes with a visitation from state officials, possibly law enforcement, and up to $5,000 fine. So we're talking criminal, if you aren't sure whether or not you're going to make New Hampshire your permanent domicile. It's really, really quite abrupt, and it's opening people's eyes. But I will also say that, that is a process. And so what we're looking to do with the free and fair elections ordinance is to educate communities about what's happening with their voting rights, how they're being restricted, how they're being infringed upon, and in essence, yanked out from underneath their feet. And to present to them that through a free and fair elections ordinance, you can make decisions about the election process at the local level, decide how that process is going to carry out. Do you want to use vote counting machines? Well, if you do, then do you want to verify those vote counts before any report is then given to the state, so that you know that the machines are accurate? If you don't want to use those vote counting machines, to have the authority to go back to hand counting and to establish a process in place to verify those counts, so that an accurate count is being presented to the state. What about big money in politics? Do you want to restrict the kinds of donations that are being made? All these kinds of decisions can be made at the local level through a free and fair elections ordinance. And so that's what we're doing, is we're educating communities about those ordinances, and looking to get them on the 2018 town meeting.
This is what I love so much about community rights organizing, is the fact that we're actually encoding in writing what we want.
Correct.
We're actually creating something. We're manifesting a vision, and then we're creating the structure in law to be able to uphold that vision. Now let's look at this from another perspective, and that is that when a community enacts this free and fair elections community bill of rights, wouldn't you think, based on what's currently happening at the state level, that the legislators are going to be maybe even outraged at this, and come at this with a vengeance, and try and invalidate it in some way or another?
Absolutely. I can see that potential. I think that that's very likely. And It may be an odd thing to say, but that might be one of the best things that could happen,
Right.
because sometimes we need that shock effect to wake us up, to help us to see that what we thought democracy is not what it is. Meaning, many people believe that we exist in a democracy, especially with town meeting. There's this sense that we have a democratic process at the local level, when in reality we do not. Anything that gets enacted at the local level can be preempted by the state, and that is true whether we're talking about voting rights, energy, water, you name it, sludge, food choices, all of those things, sanctuary cities, livable wages, all of that can be preempted by the state. And so really what this is doing is getting at the root underneath that, which is to recognize, secure, and protect the right of local self-government, so that that authority is secured at the local level and then driven upwards to the state level. So you and I have talked in the past about the New Hampshire Community Rights Amendment, which would then take that local governing authority and secure it within the New Hampshire Constitution. So adding Article 40, right of local self-government, to the first part of the New Hampshire Constitution, which is our Bill of Rights. That was first heard in 2016, and the New Hampshire Community Rights Network is making efforts to reintroduce that for the 2018 legislative year.
So we're really talking about grassroots organizing here.
Yes.
And this is true grassroots organizing. This is not just writing up signs and marching and parades and signing online petitions and showing up and testifying at hearings and stuff like this. This is actually doing the fundamental groundwork that must be done in order to create systemic change. You actually have to change the law. But usually what happens is, in order to make the laws the way that that communities would really desire them, you actually have to break the law. So there are state laws that will, if they're not already in existence, they'll bring them into existence to fight the practice of local community self-government. Wouldn't you say that this type of democracy really is the enemy of the state at this point?
Yeah, this is, there's many of us as people, and there's really a minority of government officials, and and corporations are also playing a part in this, and so that's part of that elite minority, and they're very intimidated by the public majority. So this push for to squelch what we the people hold on to as democracy, and being able to participate directly in that democratic process is a huge threat to the powers that be. And so I think it's going to continue down this road. And as I said, it's might be one of the best things that could happen, is this very blatant awareness of the fact that this is being attacked, our democracy at the local level here in New Hampshire. I mentioned this before, facade. Many people here believe that we have local democracy because of the town meeting process. And the biggest challenge to the organizing is helping people to see that that is not the case. And when they hear their state government saying to them, we believe in self-government, what they're learning this year with our new, Republican-controlled government is that means that the state gets to decide. That that the local self-government to them does not mean literally at your local town level. What it means to them is more state sovereignty from the federal government, but more state preemption in reference to the local community, local government. So it's a redefining of terms. So we see this within the law, we see this within the Constitution, and we see this within general society. We're just going to redefine the term. So local self-government, it now means really a stronger state government, is the way that term is being used here.
Yeah, black is white.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
if we don't like what it means, or how it's maybe inspiring the people, or motivating them to, to act in a way that is protective of not only their human communities, but also their natural communities, then we're just going to redefine those terms and have them mean something different. And it leaves the people feeling as though they're starting at square one again. So what the community rights movement is about is not looking to the state to define those terms, not looking to the state or even the federal government to define what is okay and not okay, what is protective at our local level. It's let that come from within the community. The communities know best what is best for the local environment, the local economy, the health, safety, and welfare of the people. What is a livable wage in my community may not be a livable wage in the next community. Let that come from within the community. So long as those local laws are not infringing upon existing rights that are already there as protective measures for people and the environment, but to be able to enact more protective laws at the local level is the goal for this.
It's beautiful. Now, can you, talk to us about how people can find out more? I know that there's a huge amount of educational effort that's going on there in New Hampshire, and people are going to want to know what they can do to get themselves and their communities educated about what's going on here.
Absolutely. So anyone that is interested in working at the local level, they can contact me at Michelle, Michelle, at celdef.org. They can also go on to the CELDEF website, which is celdf.org, and that stands for the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And then at the state level, which might be more applicable, obviously, to those within New Hampshire, but even New England, we've had outreach from Vermont, from Massachusetts, and Maine as well. And so I've been working with communities there. They can reach the New Hampshire Community Rights Network via their website, which is nhcommunityrights.org. And then email for the New Hampshire Community Rights Network would be info@nhcommunityrights.org.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you all for listening. I hope you people in New Hampshire will wake up, because you really are about to lose your last vestiges of democracy.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of just using it while you have it. It's a matter of using it so you don't lose it, and
Exactly.
using it to expand your ability for having self-determination, determination for yourself, your community, so that you get to decide what happens where you live and work and love, and where you recreate, what happens to the scenic beauty of your state. That should be up to you, I think, and not to some corporate boardroom 2,000 miles away deciding for you what's going to look like. So thank you very much, Michelle, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom.
Bye-bye.
Bye.